Choosing the sex of your protagonist. How do you navigate? Welcome creators, writers, and those who dream more. This is your boy Big Doula here at the Lorekings. Before you choose a character's sex, you need to understand what you're trying to get out of the story from the protagonist's standpoint. Much like choosing an environment, choosing a sex totally shifts the way your protagonist is seen, heard, and felt in the universe that you create him or her in. In order to get to this level, you have to ask yourself three basic questions. The first question you have to ask yourself is, what are the norms? If you would take, say, a Wonder Woman, the norm for the women in Amazon were to be powerful, strong, courageous, and wisdom. But if you would take that same character and put them in someplace else where the norm is, they can't even drive a car, then that's two totally different objectives, two totally different ways the same character can be perceived. And I think that's the lens you need to look at this from. Is your character dynamic? Are they going to stick out against the grain? Are they going to follow the grain? Are they going to be the outlier? Because on the flip side of that, if you're writing a story about, say, like a male teacher, and he's one of the only male teachers in like the three grades, and kind of how that norm in that environment is plays to him. So it works in both sexes, both ways. Have a male or female that is trying to do something that's against what their sex norm is. And that's whatever the norm is in whatever the story that you're creating. Know that, because that dynamic will play. And it will play in certain different ways. Some people that like the conservative side and want to stay within the norms of whatever that society is, and someone that wants to step out of the norms of what that society is. And that's how you can kind of play and create tension that way within your characters, just by the way their sex is. Now, this can be also something that you do later, because a lot of people, let's be frank, you go into it and you might just want a male character and then you work it out the other way. Or you might want a female character and you work it out the other way. Because if you're a woman, you'll think of stories that affect women more. If you're a man, you'll think of stories that affect men more. I know I get a lot of my content from actual dreams I've had. So obviously, most of the time, I'm a man in my own dreams, and that's how I get a lot of my content. And then some of the sub-characters I meet in the dream, and then I build them up that way. And I kind of elevate them and then create new ones, like who else would exist in this environment? And I think that's the way that you should go about it. The second question is, does this make sense? Now, by that, what do I mean by does it make sense? What are you talking about, does it make sense, man and female? Well, if you have a male character, the way he sees his children will be different because he didn't give birth to them than the way the mother sees the children. He can't get pregnant. He can't have all these different things happen to him that women can. And same thing from women. Same thing from a woman. You can have a massive story where she had a divorce and maybe she didn't get the kids, and kind of how that affects her because the societal norm is that the women do get the kids. And that's kind of like the way you can start working that through the story. You can create these awesome subplots from the sex of the character that you pick. And after you create this dynamic character with all these different layers, then you'll have a character that's amazing for people to read about, amazing for people to interact with, because then they become more normal. You know what I mean? They become more normal because they have layers. And these things don't have to necessarily shape the character's direction or shape the way they interact with the universe, though it will. They just give them layers. It gives them depth. And that's what I think a lot of writers struggle with when they try and create a character. They try and create these massive elements of depth when usually it's these small things. An anecdotal story about when they were a child, anecdotal story about when they were in college or as they were growing up, or just these different situations in which their sex might play, and then that kind of drives you to like a new level of the character and a new understanding and a new depth. Oh, that's the reason why they do this, or their personality is this way. It's because this one thing happened to them and it kind of shaped the way they saw the universe. The third question you have to ask yourself is, does the sex matter? So in a lot of books, and you've seen it especially in the past, there's one-word characters, and they never talk about what sex that character is, especially in short stories. And you kind of feel that in your head by the way they mention it and the way they develop the character, the way they talk about the character. You put in powerful, what powerful means to you. You'll put in funny, you'll put in angry, and what it means to you. And that's a trick by writers to allow your brain to work. Does sex become a side note to the character's development and who they are? So if you're writing something about the distant future where, you know, they're flying mechs and robots and Gundams or whatever you want to call it, and the line between female warriors and male warriors doesn't exist anymore, and it's just this it's just that the people are already there that just go, and it's not that big of a deal, then make it not a big deal in the book or in your writing. But if it's, you know, you're going back into a time when women, you know, weren't expected to leave the house, and she's out there fighting, or she's a general like a Joan of Arc or another legendary character of that, then it's going to play more. And the same thing with a man. If he's a man and he's, you know, the king or a legendary general, being a male, using his sex, like, how does that play? Does it play at all? But what if he has 4 daughters? Then all of a sudden his like family name won't get moved on. Then it becomes then it starts to matter. Like, those are the nuances that I think make things better. Those are the nuances when you talk about sex that makes things better. It makes it so your characters have more depth and they're fulfilled and they feel like a more character. It is easier to lose somebody on small aspects like how a man or a female interact in an environment than the environment itself. So say you have this imaginary science fiction environment. No one can grasp that environment or try to grasp the environment because they don't live in it every day. But people can grasp male-female relationships because they see that every day. So you actually have to be better at some of those smaller interactions in your writing, because if not, people will see the disconnect there, then they'll disconnect from the whole thing. This is your boy, Big Doula, here from the Lorekings. Watch, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Hello and welcome to 10 aspects of character design. The first aspect we're going to cover is choosing your environment. What we mean by environment is the actual area, the actual space, the actual universe that your character